My name is Mia Marta, and when I walked into that marble conference room for my uncle's will reading, I already knew I didn't belong. I was the one who had chosen passion over profit, art over asset management, and for that, I'd been politely exiled from my own family tree. They called me the hobbyist, the one with the camera, as if I were some wandering tourist and not their blood. But I still showed up, because the man whose will we were about to read, Charles Lambert, my late uncle, had once looked me in the eye and said, "You have the kind of vision that can outlive buildings." And part of me, the stupid, hopeful part, thought maybe, just maybe, he'd left me something. Not money, not shares, just a sign that I mattered. Instead, I got $10. $10. The room burst into laughter. My cousin Drew actually clapped. My Aunt Sylvia let out a soft little chuckle behind her wine-colored lips and said, "Well, that's generous." I sat there frozen, watching the legacy of my family's cruelty play out like a dress rehearsal for a play I never auditioned for. I remember gripping the chair so tightly my knuckles went white. I didn't care about the money. I never did. But the message was deafening. You are nothing, not even worth the cost of valet parking. I stood up, numb and embarrassed, ready to leave and never look back. But just as I reached the door, the family attorney, Mr. Howland, cleared his throat and said quietly, "Miss Marta, please stay a moment. There's one more thing your uncle left for you." One more thing? I turned slowly. The laughter had stopped. The room fell into a peculiar silence. That was the moment everything shifted. And if you think this is just another story about a petty inheritance squabble, think again. Because what Uncle Charles left me wasn't revenge. It was power, wrapped in truth, and sealed with a wax stamp. Mr. Howland didn't speak right away. He waited until the last of my family disappeared into the corridor, their designer heels and polished shoes echoing on marble. Then, quietly, he gestured toward the seat at the head of the table, the one my Uncle Charles always occupied with quiet command. It felt too large for me, not in size, but in history. Still, something in the stillness of the room told me this wasn't a setup for more humiliation. I sat down. From his leather case, Mr. Howland produced a thick envelope, not corporate, not legal. Navy blue, sealed with wax. I didn't need to read the name on it. I knew that handwriting, the confident tilt of each letter. My name, written the way only Uncle Charles ever wrote it. "Mia," Mr. Howland said, his voice low, steady. "Your uncle wrote this 8 months ago after his diagnosis. He kept it between us." I didn't respond. My hands moved on their own, breaking the seal as gently as if the paper were living. The first line was simple, but it cracked something open in me. If you're reading this, then I've finally pulled off one last piece of mischief. Forgive me. I know you never liked performance unless it served something honest. But this is the only way I could show you everything without interference. I read each word slowly, as if trying to inhale the man behind them. He hadn't just written a letter. He'd built a confession, a gift, and a warning, all in the same breath. You are, and have always been, my true successor, not in title, but in principle. You chose clarity over comfort, meaning over legacy. I've watched you with more pride than I've ever shown. I regret that. But I hope this will help you understand. My breath caught as I reached the middle of the letter. Everything they received today was theater. The true estate lies with you. The holdings, the assets, even the apartment no one knows about on Alder Street. It's all yours now. Not as reward. As responsibility. I pressed the page to my chest for a moment, trying to ground myself. The weight of what I was reading didn't feel like money. It felt like memory reassembled. Then came the revelation I never saw coming. The man who bought your photographs, the one with the sharp critiques and deep pockets, the one the gallery owners whispered about, his name was never Thomas Gray. That was me. I was there from the beginning, from the piece you hung with pins in that student basement show, to the series you thought no one noticed in Chicago. I felt the sting of sudden tears. I had always wondered why someone kept appearing at those shows, leaving behind nothing but a red dot sticker and silence. I thought it was luck. Now I realized it was love, disguised as distance. You taught me that legacy isn't what we build, but what we see. Through your lens, I remembered who I used to be before the suits, the silence, the boardroom votes. And I knew, when the time came, it had to be you. The letter shifted then, more practical, more direct, but still deeply human. If you ever question why I did this, remember what they did when they thought you had nothing. That was the moment I needed you to see. The way they looked at you, laughed at you. That wasn't new, but it had to be undeniable. I reached the final paragraph, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. Mia, the hardest part of life isn't failure. It's staying true when no one is watching. You've already done that. All I ask now is that you keep doing it, even when the world changes around you. When I looked up, Mr. Howland was standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the Boston skyline. He didn't rush me. He bought them all, I said quietly, not trusting my voice. He nodded, still facing away. He believed in your work more than he ever believed in his own. That was the moment it sunk in. Not the money, not the shares, but the truth that someone had seen me completely and built an empire around preserving that vision. And suddenly, I didn't feel small anymore. In the days that followed, my world reshaped itself in quiet, precise movements. No headlines, no family phone calls, just paperwork, key exchanges, and silent steps up staircases I'd never been invited to climb before. The first time I saw the Alder Street penthouse, I didn't walk. I floated. A historic building tucked discreetly into Portland's West Hills, with a private elevator that opened directly into polished hardwood floors and windows that looked out over the river like a watchful eye. It was stunning, but sterile. Until I saw the walls. They weren't bare. They were alive. Framed photographs, mine, lined every corridor, every room, every surface. Carefully lit, lovingly arranged, chronologically. My earliest photos from art school, the moody black and whites I shot with borrowed gear. My first gallery show, the Street Life series from Havana. The abstract urban decay set that never sold. All of it was here. Every single image I had ever printed and priced, and many I never knew had found a buyer, looked back at me. I stood in the center of the space for what felt like hours, arms limp at my sides, breathing in a room that knew more about me than my own mother ever had. He'd been watching, not with judgment, but with reverence. There was a leather folio resting on a pedestal near the back wall, positioned like an altar. I opened it slowly. Inside were prints that had never been shown publicly, personal works, family moments. My father laughing, my sister's hands braiding a daisy chain. A photograph I'd taken of Uncle Charles looking out a window, alone, his reflection barely visible in the glass. Beneath that image, he'd written in pencil, "What we choose to see becomes who we are." I stayed there that night. I didn't even return to my old apartment. I just curled up on the velvet bench beneath my first published piece and let the weight of it all press into me, not as a burden, but as something sacred. The next morning, Mr. Howland returned with coffee and a portfolio of documents. His movements were precise, unhurried. We sat at the long glass table in what had been Uncle Charles's personal study. It still smelled faintly of cedar and ink. "You're now the majority shareholder of Lambert Holdings," he said simply, like he was telling me the time. I stared at him. "You'll receive executive briefings weekly, but you're under no obligation to take on day-to-day operations. Your uncle left behind a strong management team. He hoped you'd provide vision, not oversight." I let the words settle. They didn't feel real. Not yet. "What happens when the family finds out?" "That's entirely your choice," he replied. "The ownership transfer will be public record in 3 weeks when the SEC filings go through. But until then, discretion is yours." A small part of me wanted to call them immediately, to watch the smugness on Drew's face crack, to hear Aunt Sylvia's practiced civility drop into panic. But deeper than that impulse was something else. Clarity. They didn't deserve my reaction. Not yet. So I waited. In those weeks, I moved through the world differently. Same camera in my hand, same slow gaze at people's faces and the shadows they cast. But now I carried a silence that had weight. I met with a small team of advisors, handpicked by Mr. Howland. I walked through numbers I didn't yet understand, foundations I now controlled, buildings I'd once passed on my way to bus stops. I said little. I listened. I took notes. But every night, I came back to that gallery of myself, that archive of faith built brick by invisible brick by a man I'd almost believed had forgotten me. And I remembered his words. What they said when they thought you had nothing, that's who they are. The day the filings went public, I didn't check the news. Instead, I stood barefoot on the rooftop garden of the Alder penthouse, camera in hand, and took a photograph of the sunrise as it broke over the Willamette River. It was the first image I'd captured since everything changed. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I just felt ready. The news broke on a Thursday morning. I didn't see it first. I heard it. My phone buzzed off the nightstand in a rapid-fire blur of messages, voicemails, and missed calls. I didn't need to check to know who they were from. When you go from invisible to inevitable, in the span of a headline, people suddenly remember your number. By noon, there was no denying it. The business press had picked it up. Lambert Holdings' majority stake transferred to Mia Marta. Some articles speculated on my background. Others tried to piece together a narrative from scraps of old gallery shows. A few even published my photo, the one from a Portland arts fundraiser 3 years ago. Half-lit, unsmiling, framed like I was already an enigma. And just like that, the silence I had lived in for years was replaced by a spotlight I hadn't asked for. The first call came from my cousin Drew. "Hey, Mia," he said, voice unnaturally smooth, like he was selling something. "Crazy week, huh? Listen, I was thinking, maybe we should grab lunch. Talk about the future of the company, you know?" I leaned against the kitchen counter of the Alder penthouse, the same place I used to dream of affording groceries, and stared at the view. It was cloudy. Fitting. "What is it you think we need to talk about?" I asked. "Oh, just transitions. The team. Leadership. I mean, I've been working with the board for years. I know the inner workings. Could help you out. We could make a strong team." It wasn't surprising. I just didn't expect it to sound so rehearsed. "Drew," I said quietly, "you laughed in my face." Not once. Not privately. In a room full of people. There was a pause, long and thin. "That wasn't personal. You know how tense those readings are. People get weird." "No," I said, still calm. "People get honest." I ended the call before he could spin more. The next visitor came uninvited. My Aunt Sylvia. She showed up at the gallery 3 days later, unannounced and perfectly dressed in a designer coat she once told me was too sophisticated for artists. She walked the exhibit slowly, pausing in front of a photograph of a woman at a bus stop, her hands weathered, her eyes alert. Then she turned to me. "You framed them well," she said. I didn't answer. "You've changed," she added, almost kindly. "No," I said. "I've just stopped apologizing." She stood there for a moment, considering that. "Charles always saw something in you," she said. "I thought it was sentimentality. Now I wonder if it was vision." I didn't ask her to stay longer, but not every face that resurfaced brought poison. Heather, my younger cousin, reached out not with strategy, but something resembling humility. She invited me for coffee. No press, no boardroom. Just a quiet booth in a cafe near the river. "I was jealous of you," she admitted, stirring her tea without drinking it. "You had the courage to leave. I stayed, but I never really belonged either." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "I thought if I played the role long enough, I'd grow into it. But I've spent my whole adult life climbing a ladder I'm not even sure leans against the right wall." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't see her as an extension of the family. I saw her as someone else trying to untangle herself. "You don't have to keep climbing," I said. "You can build something instead." We sat for an hour after that. talking, not as heirs, but as women who had grown up with expectations so loud they drowned out their own voices. That night, I opened a drawer in the penthouse and pulled out the $10 check. Still crisp, still unsigned, still framed in silence. It no longer stung. It had become a marker, a point of departure. The last call came from Mr. Howland. "Just a reminder," he said. "The board will expect you at the next quarterly meeting. There's no legal requirement, but—" "I'll be there," I replied without hesitation, because showing up, on my own terms, had become the most powerful thing I could do. And this time, I wouldn't be sitting at the edge of the room. I would be at the head of the table. The gallery smelled like fresh paint and possibility. 6 months had passed since the will reading, and the space had transformed. What was once a forgotten brick warehouse in the industrial district now stood as a sanctuary for art and intention. We called it the Marta Collective, not because I needed my name on the door, but because it had been built from what I'd been given and what I refused to waste. On opening night, the building thrummed with quiet energy. The main hall featured a retrospective of Uncle Charles's hidden work, photographs he had taken in his youth, raw and honest. His lens had wandered into corners most people avoided. A boy with scraped knees sitting on church steps. A laundromat owner sweeping tile under fluorescent light. There was grit in those images. And love, too. Love for moments the world considered disposable. Beside them, we had installed my pieces, old and new. I hadn't stopped creating. Not even during the flood of meetings, paperwork, and sudden wealth. If anything, my vision had sharpened. The edges clearer, the shadows more meaningful. But it was the third wing of the gallery that mattered most to me. That space held the debut works of 6 young artists, photographers whose names no one knew yet, but whose eyes already saw deeper than most. They had been selected through the Lambert Foundation's new mentorship program. Each had been given time, space, equipment, and perhaps, most importantly, belief. They walked the exhibit that night with nervous grace, their shoulders squared with quiet pride. I remembered that posture. I had carried it once, in rooms where no one expected me to belong. Aunt Sylvia came early, her arrival as polished as ever. She paused in front of a photograph Uncle Charles had taken of an elderly woman seated alone on a porch, her hands resting on a Bible. "I didn't know he could see like this," she murmured. "He did," I replied. "He just didn't think anyone would care." She didn't argue. Instead, she looked at me for a long moment, her eyes softer than I remembered. Maybe we never gave him room to be more than what we needed. I didn't respond. Some truths hang heavier in silence. Later, Heather found me near the artist wall. "You created something," she said. "Not just a gallery, a bridge." I smiled. "He left me the lumber. I just had to decide what kind of structure it should become." We both turned to look at one of her favorite student pieces, a stark image of cracked pavement and a child's chalk drawing vanishing in the rain. She reached for my hand. "Thank you for not turning this into revenge." "I thought about it," I admitted. But then I realized revenge is just another form of giving them control. In a quiet corner, Mr. Howland approached and handed me a small envelope. His expression gave nothing away, but I knew what it was before I opened it. Another letter, one final message. The handwriting inside was unmistakable. "If you're reading this, then you've done it. You've carried the weight with grace. Now comes the harder part, living it without letting it own you. Remember, money is a mirror. It reflects who you are, not who you pretend to be. Keep your vision clear, Mia. Always." I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket. Outside, the city lights flickered like scattered stars. For the first time, I wasn't searching for direction. I was setting it. I didn't need to reclaim a family name or rewrite the rules of a company. I just needed to create, and to make space for others to do the same. That night, long after the last guest had left, I returned to the penthouse. The framed $10 check still hung by the entrance. Quiet, unmoved. But I had changed. What once felt like an insult had become a symbol, not of rejection, but of redirection. Uncle Charles hadn't left me wealth. He'd left me a question. What will you do with what they laughed at? And I had answered, not with anger, but with light.